Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Arden, and welcome to Monday Night Live. Tonight, I've got the networking guru, Will Kintish, with us. Will is a big fan of how to win friends and influence people. So am I. It's one of the best books that's ever been out, and we're going to talk about the lessons from it. Will, are you there? I've got three questions for you before you start.
I am indeed, Derek. I am
Fantastic.
indeed.
Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, Will, how did you get into the Dale Carnegie material? Secondly, some people might say that how can it be relevant today when the book was written in 1936? And thirdly, tell us about the key messages, please.
I go for lunch with a fella called Andrew, and we sit in this restaurant at Mere Golf Club, a very posh golf club in Cheshire, and he's sitting there studying the menu, and he says, "Test me." Test you, Andrew? He said, "Yeah, there are 21 items on here, and you give me a number, and I can tell you what was on the menu." And that's what I did. So I said, "What's number 22?" And he said, "Well, that's ham and eggs." And not 22 because it was only 21. What's number 18? And what's number 6? That was a pizza. Yes, I know Mike Ogilvy. I was always rubbish at numbers. And I said, and he learned and he gave me all these answers perfect. I said, "How did you learn all that?" And he said, "I went on a Dale Carnegie course." I'd never heard of Dale Carnegie. And he convinced me to sign up, and I did. And I signed up in the early 80s, and I thought it was the most wonderful thing in the world. I read the book. This course, everybody, was started in 1912 by Dale Carnegie as a presentation skills course. And as far as I know, wherever you're all living, and I know you're living all around the place, there will be still a similar course run in your city 113 years later. And then so I was on this course. I did really well, I'm proud to tell you. I'm still a chartered accountant, by the way, everybody. And then in 1998, they said to me, "Will, we're always looking for part-time trainers. Would you like to be a part-time trainer?" I said, "I'd love to be." And they started to train me as a trainer, only in the evenings, very casual. 1999, my accountancy firm got taken over by a big national firm. And a year later, the new owners of our firm called me and said, "Will, we know you love doing training. Why don't you go and do it full time?" I said, "I can't afford to." They said, "If we give you some money, will you go away?" I said, "How much?" They said, "That much." I said, "I'll go and ask Mrs. Kintish what she thinks." So I'll go and ask Mrs. Kintish, and guess what? She said, "That is not enough." I came back. I said, "I want that much." They were obviously desperate to get rid of me. The crazy thing is, everyone, I was the best client getter, but I think I was a bit of a round peg in a square hole. And I left. And I set up my business using the Dale Carnegie techniques. Think about the title, everyone. How to Win Friends and Influence People. And as long as we take the word influence in a positive way rather than a negative way, that's what networking is. We do it every day of our lives in communication. Now, as I look at my audience today, you're all become very good and close friends of mine. I'm thinking, with this demographics, you're all over a certain age. What can I tell you today that you don't already know? So I think today what I'm going to do is to remind you perhaps of some of the things that you may have forgotten, but better still, take some of my ideas and share them with your children and grandchildren. Because my concern is that in terms of communication, the kids would much rather type than talk. And that is the big issue today. So I'm going to give you a few thoughts, but as Derek asked the second question, which was, is it still as relevant? It is more relevant than ever today to win friends and influence people. And how can we influence people through a TikTok or an email or a WhatsApp? The only way to do it is face to face, or at worst, doing it like this. So I'm just going to share a few thoughts with you as to some of the main items. The Dale Carnegie book, which is probably in its 33rd edition, has got basically 30 principles. And what I'm asking you to do, everybody, is buy for your grandchildren or your children, buy them the book. It's the easiest read of all. It's basically that they come up with a principle and then they give a story. And it's as simple as that. It's a 2-hour read, and it really did change my life. I mean, this is the first one. I don't think my 7 grandchildren have ever asked me anything about me. I've taught them now that when they come into my house to say, "Hello, Grandpa, how are you?" And I say, "Oh, I'm very well. Thank you for asking. How are you, Amy? How are you, Ollie? How are you, Marnie?" But had they not been taught that, they never ask questions. And I'm trying to teach them to show genuine interest in other people. I work in a hospice. I worked there this morning, and I had a beautiful 5 minutes with a lady who started showing genuine interest in me. She said, "How did you get involved in the hospice? Oh, you've got an unusual accent. Where do you come from?" I said, "I come from Manchester." "Oh, what made you come from Manchester?" And so on and so on. And there she was, shining a light all over me. And I then wasn't surprised to find out, and this is not coincidence, everybody, surprised to find out that she was a bereavement counsellor. And she was actually perhaps using me as part of it, because it appears you can qualify as a bereavement counsellor at different levels. And she asked me some great questions. But can I ask you all, rhetorical or not, do people ever show interest in you? I find that 99% of the time, I'm the one that always asks that first question. And I just don't know why. And I find it's more so with men than women. I shouldn't say that, but I'm saying it. I go walking with people. I do a lot of hiking, and there are some people on the walks who I can go 5 miles, and if I didn't ask questions, they'd never ask me anything. So that for me is the most important bit of all, showing genuine interest in the other people. Because if you accept that networking is talking to people, then the major part of the talking should be asking questions. Now, this, in a way, isn't a Dale Carnegie principle, but it fits. The begin in a friendly way is a Dale Carnegie principle, but this is my acronym. This is all about the 1 minute when we meet people for the first time. It's an acronym, A Shine. So on Wednesday, I'm doing a training workshop in London, and I will be sharing my A Shine with the young, I think they're chartered surveyors. I will be explaining to them it's all about first impressions. So what does it stand for? Well, the first A stands for appearance. Think about it. Before we open our mouths at an event, it's all the way we're dressed. Now, these days, we don't have to dress suited and booted, but as I say to people, make sure you dress appropriately. So that is my A. The S, everybody, stands for smile, of course. Can you imagine walking into a room and frowning at somebody? "Hello, nice to meet you, Derek." That doesn't work, of course. The H stands for the handshake. Now the I stands for introduce yourself. When we go to events or meet people for the first time, and I include social events, I include Christmas parties and everything, we're always asked two questions. What's your name and what do you do? Which brings me, and I'll come back to that in a moment, which brings me to the N, the name. And this is a Dale Carnegie quote. Are you ready for this, everybody?
Ready.
A person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Getting other people's names creates the best intimacy and the best close relationship right from the start. And that's what the N is in Shine. And people say, oh, I forget somebody's name immediately. And my retort to that, everybody, is you don't forget the name. You're just not listening. On Sunday morning, I went to watch my grandson play, and I was introduced to a guy, and his name was Elad, E-L-A-D. And as he was introducing himself, I thought, that's an unusual name. And I thought, how am I going to remember this? And I thought of, hey, lad, as in Lancashire or Yorkshire. And we actually got talking about, he said, oh, you've remembered my name. He said, most people, it just goes over the head. And I explained to him how important names were. And he was one of the people who does think names are important. So when I meet somebody for the first time and they say, hello, my name is Tim Durkin, I say, hello, Tim. Nice to meet you. And I think of Tiny Tim, which was a singer in the 60s here, and I will associate your name. But while I'm talking to you at that event, I will remember your name. I might forget your name the next day, but at the moment, I am remembering your name. But let's talk about the I in A Shine, everybody. Your name. You know for a fact that most people say, I'm rubbish at names. So unless you help them, they're not going to remember your name either. So I, more often than not, will say, hello, my name is Will, with a pause, Will Kintish. Or, depending on the circumstances, I just say, hello there, nice to meet you. My name is Will. And most people will mirror the way you introduce yourself to the way they introduce themselves to you. But for me, names are important. No, they're fundamental. Sticking with the I, everybody, we're always asked, what do you do? What do you do? By the way, I've stopped using that question. I love this one. The late Queen Mother told me this, not directly, but I learned it. At the turn of the 20th century, the first 50 years of the 20th century, she would meet a lot of women. This is our late Queen Elizabeth's mother. In the early stages, she'd say to people, what do you do? And these women would say, oh, Mom, I'm just a housewife, or I'm just a mother. And she changed it. She said, what keeps you busy all day? And I love that one. I really think, and that gets people thinking, what does keep me? And you get a much better response than what do you do? And you know what? People don't care what you do. They only care what you do for them. And when people ask me what I do, and I learned this, and I'm sure, Derek, has there been a Lois Creamer on this course? No?
No, not on Monday Night Live, but I see
Right.
he's
Lois
speaking.
Creamer, top PSA or NSA, excuse me. She taught me this, and I use it all the time. Now, when people ask me what I do, I work with people who want to develop their networking skills. Or if I meet an accountant or a lawyer or a chartered surveyor, I work with professional people who want to develop their networking skills. So that is the I. The I is introduce yourself with my name is Will Kintish. And when people ask you what you do, tell them what you do and not what you are. Work hard on the name. And the E, of course, stands for eye contact. When you are in conversation, everybody, I'll come back to it in a moment, the E. Here it is now. Listen with your eyes. Excuse me, I've got a really bad cough and cold. I've lost my sense of taste and my sense of smell in the last 48 hours, which is no good for eating. So I've stopped eating for a couple of days. No point. Try eating with not being able to taste or smell anything. Bad news. When you ask someone a question, people can lie with their words, but they can't lie with their body language and tone of voice. So when it says there, be a good listener, listen with your eyes, look at them very carefully to make sure that what they're saying to you fits with the words that are coming out of their mouth. A Dale Carnegie quote, let the other person do most of the talking. Be a good listener and encourage others to talk about themselves. And really, it's as simple as that. I was at a dinner 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I'll never forget it. I sat next to this guy. I found out he's retired, been retired for 20 years. And I said, what did you do? And he told me, and it was fascinating. He started off as a junior at Rothschild's Bank. You've all heard of Rothschild's Bank, of course. And he ended up on the main board. Now, you would expect this man to be the most fascinating fellow in the world. Now, the big problem when we go to events and we have at a dinner and you're sitting next to somebody for 2 hours, you know something, everybody? He never asked me one question. He knew as much about me at dessert as he did at the soup. It was awful. I mean, when it got to dessert, I thought, I'm going to stop asking him questions because I was just getting a bit agitated with him. Do you know what he then did? He then said, oh, and let me tell you about the time that I was doing such and such. And that was terrible. So when he went home, he knew all about me, and hopefully I made it as interesting as I could. But when you meet a good networker and they ask you about you, you can't help yourselves. None of us can help ourselves. We end up talking about ourselves. Well, what I've learned is an acronym. The acronym is WAIT, W-A-I-T. What does it stand for? It stands for why am I talking? So if I'm talking to Tim, who I can see on screen here, and he's asking me about this and my holidays and my family and my travel, I see in front of me the word wait. And I say, Tim, enough about me. Tell me about your holiday. Tell me about your health and how that's been. So if people are genuinely interested in you, by all means, tell them. But then don't let it go on for so long. Flip it so that you're finding out about them. I'm going to let you into a secret. Mrs. Kintish, to whom I've been married now for 54 years and 1 month, she hates me. She hates me. And I'll tell you why. Because I never argue with her. Ever. If she says that is black and I know it's white, I say, I don't think so. But if that's what you want to believe, that's fine by me. Honestly, everybody, I never, ever argue. What's the point? There's no point at all. It works really well for me. And I think she's looking for an argument. Like most people, they want an argument. I don't argue with anybody ever. I just might say, you might want to consider looking at it a different way. Maybe if you turn it that way rather than that way, it might work better. But that for me, in the 30 principles of Dale Carnegie, believe it or not, that is the only negative in the book. Avoid criticizing, condemning, and complaining. How many people say thank you? Again, I write and thank everybody for everything. If I ask somebody a question and they respond to me, I will, or even if it's a little emoji with a thumbs up and a smiley face. Trudy says to me sometimes, why are you still working, or why are you still on your computer? Because I'm involved in a lot of charity work, a lot of voluntary work, and people are writing to me with things, and I acknowledge everything. And again, is it still relevant today? The answer is yes. Do people still do it? I'm not sure. I'm coming to near the end now. And that's another one. And these are just basic things, everybody, about respecting other people's opinions. And finally, what about that one? When you make a mistake, I was chairman of a charity. I'm still chairman of a charity, and the CEO was not attentive to his job, to the fact that he wasn't looking after the money. You ready for this one, everybody? We were losing at the rate of £20,000 a month, this charity. And I was very, very upset. Now, this CEO, I'm going to give you some of my religion now. At Yom Kippur time, which is September and October, is the Day of Atonement. He writes to me and says, oh, and I got rid of the CEO, and he knew I was really upset with him. And the Day of Atonement, no, the day before the Day of Atonement, he said, Will, please forgive me for everything I've done. And I said, until you apologize for all the mistakes you've made, I can't forgive you. And to this day, I will speak to him one of these days, but he has to admit his mistakes, but he never did. And whether he ever will, I don't know. Just for the record, everybody, he was an MP, a member of Parliament for 18 years. Maybe he thought that he didn't need to apologise for anything. So I'm coming off here now and stopping sharing. And just I'm going to say to you that the Dale Carnegie book ought to be mandatory learning in all schools. People ought to. There we are. Derek's got the version. What year was that published, Derek?
Keep going, Will. You've gone a bit muted.
What year was it? This was published in 1964, although it was written in 1935. Can you imagine?
Yeah, you would have. I thought you'd have the 1936 one at your age, Will, but I've only got the 2006 one myself here. But
I'd like it to be. So, as I said to you at the beginning, everybody, you've not learned anything. Maybe there's one or two bits and pieces where you think maybe I ought to do that a bit more. But I'm finding that the thing that breaks my heart more than anything is that people don't ask enough questions. And I'm getting some nods. Maybe when the recording finishes, we can hear other people's views on the art of good conversation, because the art of good conversation has to be toing and froing. And I'm just going to finish with this. I have a 4-question rule. If I'm at an event, social or business, and I ask somebody 4 questions and they don't ask me anything, what I read is they're not interested in me. They don't want to learn anything. Perhaps they don't want to talk to me, in which case I will courteously and politely move on. I call it dumping them, because if somebody's not showing any interest in me, what's the point? I'll go and find somebody else to talk to. On that note, Derek, can I say thank you for inviting me, and I return back to headquarters.
Well, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you. And you say we didn't learn things, but we need to relearn things. That's the issue. And we forget. And sometimes we need to hear things 21 times. Well, certainly you've reminded me of some things that I need to think about. Number one, I thought for people watching this or listening to this, show genuine interest in the other person. That's just so important. Number two, wait. Why am I talking? That's a fantastic question to ask yourself internally before you interrupt someone, and then avoid criticizing, condemning, and complaining. Your 4-question rule, I think, is a bit generous. I think maybe 3 questions might be better, but you're a genuine accountant, and I'd just like to ask all members of Monday Night Live to thank Will in the normal way.
Thank you, everyone.
And anyone that wants to get in touch with Will, you can get hold of Will at willkintish.com. And
Just now, can we get it right?
Yes, go on.
Just type in Kintish on the internet. I come up #1. Type in Kintish and everything's there.
Brilliant. Will, thanks so much for joining us yet again and being a long-term life member of Monday Night Live. Will Kintish, thank you very much.
Thank you.